Now, we look into some of the very important key terms that have been used so far in the chapter. Dreaded the prospect. It means was in great fear of something that would happen in the future. Second one is an appalling spectacle, which means a shocking scene. The third term here is ricocheting bullet, a bullet which changes direction after hitting a wall. The next one here is took her into my confidence. It means shared my experience or secret. Infuriated means to be very angry and extremely frustrated. Portly means stout. You can look at the illustrations next to the meanings here and gain a better insight. Nuzzle means to rub gently. Bounded onto means climbed up quick and real fast. Whipped off means quickly took off. So now let's start the round of questions and answer and discuss them. Question number 1 is, how was Mijbil to be transported to England? The answer to this question could be that Mijbil was packed in a box as the airlines had directed the author Maxwell. As British Airlines did not allow pets on board, the author had to book a ticket on a different airline from Iraq to Paris and then Paris to London. Question number 2. What did Midge do to the box? Why did Maxwell put the otter back in the box? How do you think he felt when he did this? Let's first begin by answering the first part of the question number 2. What did Midge do to the box? The box was lined with a metal sheet. Midge didn't feel comfortable in the box and therefore tried to escape. In his attempt to escape, Mijbil tore into the metal lining of the box and in the process hurt himself. The next part to question number 2. Why did Maxwell put the otter back in the box? The answer to this question could be that as there was no other way to carry Midge to London, Maxwell put the otter in the box again. He must have felt pity on the way the otter hurt himself. Moreover, he must also be worried as well. Question number 3. Why does Maxwell say the air hostesses was the very queen of her kind? So, the answer to this could be that the air hostess was very sympathetic and understanding after listening to Maxwell's story. She understood how he might be feeling and then gave him permission to take the otter out of the box. Due to all of this, Maxwell therefore went on to refer to the air hostess as the very queen of her kind. Question number 4. What happened when the box was opened? The answer to this question could be that as soon as the box was open, Mijbil ran out. Then Mijbil ran all over the place, scaring all the passengers on board on that particular flight. It created a chaos, and most of the people in the plane got extremely scared and frightened. Now let's move on. We will now look into what the chapter has in store for us. After an eventful journey, Maxwell and his otter reach London, where he has a flat. Midge and I remained in London for nearly a month. He would play for hours with a selection of toys, ping pong balls, marbles, rubber fruit, and a terrapin shell that I had bought back from his native marshes. So soon after the journey of Mijbil and Maxwell got completed, Mijbil was extremely tired, and so he lay flat. They stayed together in London for almost a month, and as Maxwell recalls, that he had an extremely good time playing with toys, ping pong, marbles, rubber fruit, and other things, and especially a terrapin shell that Maxwell had bought for Mijbil to play with from his own native marshes. With the ping pong ball, he invented a game of his own which could keep him engrossed up for up to half an hour at a time. So it seems, according to Maxwell's account, that Mijbil, his otter, was extremely fond of ping pong ball, and they happened to create a game which would keep Mijbil extremely busy and occupied in the fun game. Moving on, a suitcase that I had taken to Iraq had become damaged on the journey home, so that the lid, when closed, remained at a slope from one end to the other. Mitchell discovered that if he placed the ball on the high end, it would run down the length of the suitcase. So, the particular game of ping pong ball, which was described before by Maxwell, was nothing but a game created using one of the suitcases of Maxwell that got damaged on his journey back to home. He would dash around to the other end to ambush its arrival, hide from it, crouching, to spring up and take it by surprise, grab it, and trot off with it to the high end once more. So, Mitchell's play routine on the suitcase that was broken along with the ping pong ball was extremely engrossing and enthusiastic for Mitchell. So he had a variety of moves and sequences and a process in place while he used the broken suitcase to play with the ping pong ball. Outside the house, I exercised him on a lead precisely as if he had been a dog. Mijbil quickly developed certain compulsive habits on these walks in the London streets. So soon after Mijbil and Maxwell settled back in London, Maxwell took Mijbil outside the house, tying him in a leash-like manner as if he was a dog. During this process of their regular walks, Mijbil happened to also instill certain habits that were extremely compulsive during their walks in the streets of London. Like the rituals of children who on their way to and from school must place their feet squarely on the center of each paving block, must touch every seventh upright of the iron railings, or pass to the outside of every second lamppost. So, certain compulsive habits that Mijbil happened to be associated with during the evening walks with Maxwell in the streets of London were quite similar to the compulsive habits that can be seen among children, especially when they are backing back from school. And during this particular walk to school and back from school, they would want to place their feet in a very arranged and sequenced manner on each of the tiles that they walked upon. Opposite to my flat was a single-storied primary school, along whose frontage ran a low wall some 2 feet high. So, the location of Maxwell's flat and house was such that in front of his flat, in fact, it was quite the opposite of his location, that there lay a single-storied primary school whose front lawn was quite low to a height of some 2 feet. On his way home, but never on his way out, Mitchell would tug me into this wall, jump onto it, and gallop the full length of its 30 yards. The hopeless distraction both of public and of staff within. So, because of the close proximity of the primary school wall that was opposite to Maxwell's house, always while coming back home, Mijbil would tug Maxwell into the wall and jump onto it and gallop all of its length, and also invite a lot of attraction from both the students and the staff who were inside the primary school. It is not, I suppose, in any way strange that the average Londoner should not recognize an otter, but the variety of guesses as to what kind of animal this might be came as a surprise to me. So the people around in the streets of London, whenever they saw Mijbil, they made quite a variety of guesses to make a statement as well as guess the animal that Mijbil was. Maxwell recalls to be extremely surprised to see the people's inability to recognize what an otter looks like. Otters belong to a comparatively small group of animals called mustelines, shared by the badger, mongoose, weasel, stoat, mink, and others. I faced a continuous barrage of conjectural questions that sprayed all the mustelines but the otter. So, otters belong to a small group of animals who are called as mustelines, and this particular name of animals is shared by a variety of other species like mink, mongoose, weasel, etc. More random guesses hit on a baby seal and a squirrel. Is that a walrus, mister? Reduced me to giggles, and outside the dog show, I heard a hippo, a beaver, a bear cub, a leopard, one apparently that had changed its spots, and a brontosaur. Midge was anything but an otter. So people around had an extremely hard time guessing the animal group that Mijbil belonged to. Nobody was able to come to the conclusion that Mijbil was an otter. People around made extremely weird and strange guesses. They called Mijbil to be a baby seal, a squirrel, a walrus, a bear cub, and so on. But none could guess that Mijbil was an otter. But the question for which I awarded the highest score came from a laborer digging a hole in the street. I was still far from him when he laid down his stool, put his hands on his hips, and began to stare. As I drew nearer, I saw his expression, which was of extreme surprise and affront, as though he would have me known that he was not one upon whom to play jokes or have any kind of fun around. I came extremely close to him. He spat, glared, and then growled out, "Here, mister, what is that supposed to be?" So, on one of his walks outside the house, Maxwell came across a laborer who was digging a hole in the streets nearby, who, when happened to see Maxwell along with Mijbil, stopped his work and began to stare at them. He happened to be of an extremely stern look, and as Maxwell came close to him and approached him, it came out to be as though he is somebody who should not be joked around. In fact, as Mijbil and Maxwell came close to the laborer's location, the laborer asked him as to what Mijbil is supposed to be. There are several key terms that we must still keep in mind while understanding this chapter in a comprehensive manner. Let's see what these key terms are and learn them. Terrapin shell, it means the shell of small turtle found in North America. Distraction, something that takes away one's attention and concentration. Compulsive habits. Compulsive habits refers to those repetitive behaviors and actions and habits that are extremely impossible to control. Engrossed means completely interested in. Ambush means to attack suddenly from a hidden spot without the other person realizing. Upright over here in the context of this chapter means post or rod. Barrage of conjectural questions. A stream of questions filled with random and a variety of guesses. Let's now move on further into the chapter to discuss a few questions and answer them. Before we take a moment to look at these questions, let's now look into some of the questions that we should have come across in this chapter so far. Before we dive into the questions and make an attempt to discuss and answer them, let's take a moment and think about them. Question number 1. What game had Midge invented? The answer to this question could be that Midge invented a game of playing with the ping pong ball in an extremely unique manner. One of the author's suitcase was damaged and had a slope on the top part because of the damage. Mijbil would put the ball on the high end and run to catch it as it slided to the lower end. Question number 2. What are compulsive habits? What does Maxwell say are the compulsive habits of number 1, school children, and number 2, Midge? To answer this question, we must see that compulsive habits are usually strange act or behavior which a person does without clear reason. For example, a cricket player may put on his right shoes first as he believes it would bring him good luck, or a kid jumping over a fence instead of going through the passageway. Usually, compulsive behavior of children are full of childhood mischief, and those of adults are of incorrigible type. To answer the first part of this question, as per the story given here, children must place their feet squarely on the center of each paving block. They must touch every seventh upright of the iron railings or pass to the outside of every second lamp post. The second part of this question, its answer could be that Mijbil, while on its way to home, would jump over the boundary wall railing and run at full speed throughout its length. Question number 3. What group of animals do otters belong to? The answer to this question could be otters belong to a comparatively small group of animals called mustelines. The other animals of this group are badger, mongoose, weasel, stoat, mink, and others, to name a few. Question number 4. What guesses did the Londoners make about what Midge was? The answer to this question could be that as otters are not found in England, so Londoners and the people in the streets of London made the wildest possible guesses about Midge. Their guesses ranged from a baby seal, a squirrel, a hippo, to a brontosaurus. Moving on, let's see what the chapter has in store for us. There are still a few more questions that we need to address to know whether we have truly understood, learned, and comprehended the chapter so far. So let's look into what question number 1 over here is. Question 1. What things does Midge do which tell you that he is an intelligent, friendly, and a fun-loving animal who needs love? The answer to this question could be that Mijbil invented his own game out of ping pong ball and a worn-down suitcase. He loved water, and once he understood that an opening the tap water came out of it. He would get into the hot tub and played with water. He had gradually formed a special attachment with Maxwell. It gave desperate when Maxwell left it in a box and wanted it to come out as soon as possible. Question number 2 over here says, what are some of the things we come to know about otters from this text? Otters belong to a comparatively small group of animals called mustelines. This particular category of animals is a term that is shared by animals who are also known as a badger, a mongoose, a weasel, a stoat, a mink, and others, to name a few. They are found in large numbers in marshes. Arabs keep them as pets and tame them. Otters love to spread water and splash in it. Maxwell's otter was of a race previously unknown to science and was at length named by zoologists as Latrugale perspiliata maxwelli, or Maxwell's otter. Question number 3 says, why is Midge species now known to the world as Maxwell's otter? The answer to this question could be that Maxwell's otter was of a race previously unknown to science and was at length named by zoologists as Lutrugale perspiliata maxwelli. Hence, it came to be known and understood from a short term known as Maxwell's otter. We will now go through a quick revision to have a better comprehension and understanding of the chapter that we have learned so far. So let's go through it. In the year 1956, the author was in Iraq when he decided to get himself a pet otter. He had recently lost his dog, Johnny. A few days later, two Arabs brought him an otter in a sack. The author named his otter Mijbil. The author stayed in Basra for a few days where he learned how much otters love the water. He developed a strong bond with Mijbil. When the author was returning to London, transporting Mijbil became a problem. He made a small box for the otter, but on the plane, the otter escapes from the box and runs around, creating some confusion and chaos. During the stay in London, the author is confronted with a variety of guesses from Londoners about what Mijbil might be. The story explores the bond that develops between the author and his new pet, as well as the reaction of people to a new species they were not aware of.